Bonjour à toutes et à tous, bienvenue au Forum des images. Je m'appelle Claude Farge.
Welcome to Forum des Images. It's a great honor to be the general manager of this great institute. We have three presentations in a framework of cartooning for peace. It's part of a larger organization of Partenariat Français. You are aware it's different. Here we have created a new images seminar regarding virtual reality images with the Africans, and we have had several artists coming from Africa who have taken part in the co-production market we have implemented. We have also organized video mapping on the church called the Center Stage just outside here. Great time. We had an open scene for 3 days. We have organized under the canopy a great screen, large screen, 11 institutions at Forum des Halles. People don't know that. We have organized a show with plenty of artists coming from Africa. Cartooning for Peace, we are delighted to have you here today. Also, Gilles Rousseau, the programming manager,
qui a été décalé dans le temps, donc qui aura lieu dans son entièreté l'année prochaine.
You would not like it if I missed Tigritude. And we have a full weekend to organize the history of Africa, an overview through the cinema history every week, every year, which describes the history of this beautiful continent, Africa. I've been here only 3 years at Forum des Images, but since I've joined, I've heard a lot about cartooning for peace. I'm delighted to get back in touch with cartooning for peace. I was in touch with Mr. Plantu, former chairman Jean. In short, I'm delighted to meet him for real. I've heard a lot from him, and we have met and gathered Cartooning for Peace years ago, and there was a major show under the canopy with drawings on a large screen, and we had organized a meeting here, and this is something I've heard of, so I'm very happy to get in touch with Cartooning for Peace. So I was enthusiastic to have you here again. And let me turn the floor to the new chairman of Cartooning for Peace. Yes, put your hands together, and please enjoy your afternoon here. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Patrick Amassour. I press cartooning for a newspaper called L'Opinion, and over 18 months I have been appointed to chair Cartooning for Peace after Jean Plantu. A few words about Cartooning for Peace. It's an international organization based here in Paris, gathering 200 cartoonists coming from 70 different countries across the world, created in 2006 after the famous event called the Prophet cartoons, press illustration on the theme of Islam and Prophet Mahomet, printed in a Danish paper, circulated across the world, which have been used, denounced, and there was an uproar across the world and even mobs across the world. A major meeting organized at the UN under Kofi Annan, so Plantu and others thought that getting the general public with press drawings and cartoons deserved special attention, so we should go on, and that's why he decided to set up Cartooning for Peace with 3 main objectives. The first objective is to promote press cartooning through shows, exhibitions, debates, to explain, to go through, and to get people to meet and debate. As you will see today, we have various forms of press illustration, various viewpoints which can be combined, confronted, and debated. Second objective, to use press illustration to talk about our common corpus at Cartooning Corpus, to talk about human rights, such as the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and especially what we want to promote. We talk about various topics such as gender equality, migrants, sharing wealth, and freedom of press, freedom of speech, to use press, illustration, to create a dialogue, to exchange viewpoints where we can listen to each other, where we can all express ourselves. The last and third objective, the plea, our goal is to follow the status of press cartoonings across the world. Are they free to draw? Are they under threat? And if it is the case, we have whistleblowers, we get warnings across the world where we have censorship and are harassed on social media, and sometimes it goes further and they can be their life is under threat, and we can try to support them through a network of partners, of course, to make sure they can continue drawing in the countries where they live. Those are the three objectives of Drawing for Peace or Cartooning for Peace, and the team is here. If you want to get our mission at Cartooning for Peace is not new. Our cartooning in Africa, it's not new. Jean Plantu was visiting Africa, the continent, very often, and for a long time we've been working with the various countries. For a long time we have gathered various cartoonists from various countries. Thanks to European support, we went to several countries across the world to support them through our pedagogical workshops. 5 countries were in Africa right from the beginning: Ethiopia, Burkina Faso, Côte d'Ivoire, Morocco, and Tunisia. We organized workshops with the cartoonists in these countries, and the high time of this cycle of actions was a very important meeting. Addis Ababa in Ethiopia in May of 2019, where we have gathered 20 cartoonists from various countries. In Addis Ababa, we have organized various workshops, discussions, and debates, and out of these major events, we had a major statement, cartoonists from Les Indérissables, a statement to make sure that press illustration becomes a fundamental, basic art or declaration. When you read Universal Declaration of Human Rights, we find it. We can see there is a growing threat in peaceful democracy. Even in those countries, we can see that it is not a matter of peace, and press illustration is a fundamental right, and we hope to be able to adopt all this by the various governments. And Cartoon in Africa is here today, which was already the name of our event in Ethiopia. You're going to see the top of the iceberg here, the debate and the meetings and the roundtable this afternoon, and the show that will start tomorrow under the canopy, but also several events on the side. A book which has been published by Calvin Levy. Title is Africa, with a great cover page illustrated by Alain Satir, who is among us, with illustration from various cartoonists, and the text have been written by Bruno Houdon, and the book has it's a beautiful book, and we are proud of it. So the Cartooning in Africa exhibition, which has been created by Cartooning for Peace, which has been circulated through a number of schools, and it comes with teaching book, pedagogical, so the teachers can use it. It's not always easy to use a press cartoon to talk about racism, gender inequality, so there is always this booklet to create exercise, to choose drawings, and to organize games with school students. And also it's a current operation we are carrying out funded by the European Union, COVID-19 response in Africa, Together for Reliable Information, which is a project which contributes to strengthen access to information and promotion of freedom of speech in Africa, funded by the European Union, implemented by Free Press Unlimited, Reporters Sans Frontières, and so on. And Cartooning for Peace is part of it. It's a number of activities we have organized around this topic. All this in a framework of Africa 2020 season. It's like football Euro. It's called Euro 2020, but it's taking place in 2021. It's called a new Temple Vivant in a framework of Africa 2020. In that framework, we have cartooning in Africa. Very quickly, I have to thank a number of people very quickly, because cartooning for peace is not alone in that. So the partners who have helped us outside Saison Africa, Institut Français, and the Commissioner Angonefal, and our teams, Forum des Images, Claude Farge, and Westfield from the structure in charge of managing the LEA Center, Réseau des Ambassades de France. I won't give you the long list of French embassies abroad. I don't know if you mean, how much it takes to bring a lot of African cartoonists all the way to Paris in terms of visa and organization. A lot of people have been locked into their hotel room for 10 days in a quarantine to come in front of you today. So they are highly motivated to be among you today, and we have been very much supported by the network of French embassies, and you will see a number of France 24, France Culture, and RFI, and France Sans Frontières, and the Mairie de Paris. If we don't get the help of Maire de Paris to support us, nothing could happen. That's all I wanted to tell you, to give you the backdrop of this action. I want to keep it short, so without further ado, the two organizations in front of Catherine Paris, the debate this afternoon, that you will attend 3 roundtables this afternoon to talk about press illustration as a pedagogical tool for citizenship and the right to information, humor and image. Second roundtable to deal with current issues, and the third roundtable, challenges and prospects. And we are going to be here together until 7 p.m. Tomorrow we will inaugurate the show under the canopy of the forum. Level -1, if I'm not mistaken, that will be inaugurated by all the cartoonists attending today, opening today at 11, opening with a fresco that will be drawn together by all the cartoonists sitting here. That's going to be tomorrow. Did I leave anything out? No, only thank you for being here. Delighted to see. Thank you for traveling all the way to Paris. And let me turn the floor to the first roundtable, without any further, to Vladimir Vasak, a journalist at TV Arte. Hello, Vladimir. Thank you, everybody. Enjoy this afternoon. Good afternoon, and thank you for being here. I will ask the speakers to take a seat. My name is Vladimir Vasak. I've been a journalist at Arte since 2012, since the beginning of this European adventure and Franco-German adventure of Arte. This is the same spirit that has guided me to cartooning, a universal culture, fighting for real values. I believe strongly universal values, and I believe cartooning is regarded as being a universal organization. That's why we are here. We want to emphasize this, to talk about this in rough times, difficult times. That's the basic idea. I do not know specifically Africa as a reporter. Visited Angola, Mozambique a long time ago. I'm not an expert in African affairs. I'm more involved in Russian affairs, and during the winter I visited Russia to report on Islam in Russia after the killing of Samuel Paty, and that was related to press illustration. I did visit Moscow, in Kherson, in Chechnya, and where the young killer came from Chechnya, who killed Samuel Paty. So we have raised the same questions that will be covered this afternoon. This issue of universalities, values, what we want to fight for. How can we afford not to give up? We don't want to give up. With my 30 years at Arte, I get the feeling that more than ever we have to fight back. We have to protect ourselves not to be overwhelmed by those who would let us believe that what we believe in is not universal and true, and it is a Western or French vision. Most of the time we have to carry on this great effort to talk about this afternoon. Here around me for this first round table, and of course the general public, you will have a chance to speak and a microphone to do so. We have among us Dlog coming from Tunisia. Welcome, Dlog, Tunisia. He spent a quarantine with his family in Paris when he first landed. Next to her, we have Yas coming from Morocco, who also happens to live in France. Yas. Mykaïa, Franco-Tunisian or Tunisian French. Whatever. Welcome, Mykaïa. And Willy, Zekid from Congo, plus Ivory Coast. Overwhelming in both countries. So we have a French-speaking roundtable to start, but if you have questions in English, we have two interpreters that you can hear at this point. It's very important to have our two interpreters, because if we want to be able to share this universal message, and if we want to have a real voice, we have to overcome the message or the hurdle of the languages. With Arte, we have provided support, and today we have a lot of reports translated in Polish, Spanish, Italian, and English. It's very important because on the Arte platform we have a lot of people watching what we are doing from far away across the world, and some reports get 10,000 views. Islam in Russia, my report, we have reached about 1 million viewers or views. So we should not overlook this type of thing, and it takes a lot of translation and interpretation is essential. And you'll have your own microphone. Because of COVID, we have to use individual microphones inside the audience. You will be able to ask your question, stand up to ask your question, and I will repeat the question. For our interpreters, that's the only constraint and limit. Each one of you, please tell us what is your personal approach in the framework of Africa 2020. Do you think it's the French people trying to remove their problems without Africa and trying to discover Africa? And I'm trying to be provocative. Frankly, I believe that this issue with workshop, you're asking us about the workshops, about the teaching it. What about cartooning in Africa and Africa 20? The season called Africa 2020. What do you think about it? What do you think the goal is? It's very useful to organize this type of event because it's a support to press cartoonists in Africa and to press illustration in Africa, giving them the opportunity to show their work and to be able to express them is really positive. I'm not in the state of mind talking or criticizing France, Africa, and all this. This is out of the way. Some people might think like that. Your basic idea is to talk about what you're doing, not the way how we as French people look and regard Africa. With this type of event, we are in a debate, an exchange of views. We don't have to talk Our position is not to talk about political issues and the role of France in Africa at all. To me, it started in 2019 when we first met in Addis Ababa. Cartoonists for Peace had gathered a number of African cartoonists from Africa, and we realized it was an opportunity to meet among Africans in a common place, to be able to exchange ideas. This event in Addis led us to believe there were a lot of differences from one African country to another. Often people say Africa is a continent seen from far away. People believe it's only one country when we in fact have 50 different countries or so. So during this event in Addis, we realized we did not know each other very well, so it was a new opportunity to get together, and we believe it's a great opportunity to come to Paris in front of the Parisian general public to explain our realities, which are sometimes very far away from what you might think in Paris. I see it as an opportunity to explain the work we're doing in Africa. That's about all. A great opportunity to talk about something gathering us, this great job, which is press cartoonist. The fact and the reality of Africa and the specificities of Africa to explain, and these specificities are not only African ones, but we are all involved in these specificities as cartoonists, wherever we come from in the world. And we are not at all in the state of mind that you have described earlier that would be organized by friends from far away. We know there is cartooning from Peace, which is not in that state of mind. Talking about that incredible media, which is, we're here to talk about press illustration, press cartoons. As far as I'm concerned, I was born in France, I must tell you. I have this dual culture that gives me across-the-board reflection and outlook, as if we had to imagine Africa's continent in despair, but it's emerging on the international scene. It's quite interesting to have a debate to express our vision on this. When you talk about a continent under Ivy, I've seen how much Air France is investing on the African market, because their project is to invest heavily on the African continent. Do you think this message should be discussed? So it's not a continent under IV in despair, but it has its own dynamic, its own. I'm not an economic expert, but I'm more involved in cultural expertise. Okay, in the field of cinema, where the issues are often raised regarding the vision that people have that must be mended, but we must raise the image of African cinema, and I'm very much in favor of that. Now, looking from Europe, a lot of Europeans have a lot of clichés on Africa, cultural clichés coming from a common history, a background, but it's not only the reality of the African continent. I find that this type of debate, of exchange, will help the general public, those who attempt to discover the reality of today's Africa, far away from Kirikou, Tarzan, and cliché. We are aware of that, but the real Africa is not well known. So it's going to be a new opportunity through this exchange to show what contemporary Africa is all about.
So you are all participating in pedagogical workshops. I think you are going to see the program on the screen. Could you please tell us what your experience in the workshops is, and have you changed after those workshops? Who would like to start? Well, indeed, It's a very interesting experience. The fact that you go towards a young audience and you can exchange around press illustrations. In fact, once again, it's an exchange. And young people that are not used to press illustrations to express themselves with press illustrations, they are going to be much more interested now. And they're going to try to make some of those press illustrations themselves. It's a fantastic tool to talk about the topics that are of interest to them and to our country and for the future. And therefore, it's a way to take some distance, on touchy subjects. So that's why it's an interesting experience, and it goes both ways. It's also me being fed by what they're saying. We've organized them in Tunisia, yes. Lately, the topic was about environment, like the subject was draw an ecologist, and in the framework of cartooning for peace, there will be an exhibition in secondary schools and in clubs where the workshops are going to take place. And then we are going to be able to discuss and analyze a cartoon and see what are the different interpretations, what are the questions. So it's also a way to learn freedom of speech. Now, was it possible to hold those types of workshops at the time of Ben Ali before the system changed in Tunisia? And do you have the feeling that you are training future soldiers or fighters for freedom of speech? Well, at the time of Ben Ali, press illustrations were being censored. Press illustrators, press cartoonists, they had to stay in the boundaries. So I don't know whether there were some workshops. I can only tell you about my own experience. At the time, I did not organize any workshops. Yes. My first job as a professional was under Ben Ali. That's not very clean, but that's the way it was. And when I was accepted as a cartoonist in this big francophone newspaper in Tunisia, I was 20 years old. I met the chief editor. He said, well, you're great. You are a child from the country. As you know, Tunisia is a free country. So you're going to be able to talk about all topics that you wish, except religion, sex, and politics. So I did about the same thing, Sex is okay, you don't have to draw about sex. Religion is part of the Tunisian constitution, so religion and Islam, I can understand that. You cannot laugh at it. But when a chief editor tells you no politics, well, so under Ben Ali, you had to play with a very strong censorship. Now, have you seen young Tunisians change working with them? It is true that after the revolution, we've seen a boom of different expressions, also with social networks. Everybody, young or not young, are using social networks to express themselves. But now, that generation was very young at the time of the revolution. My workshops, the participants were about 14, between 12 and 16 years old. So, the revolution, the Tunisian revolution is already 10 years old. Yes, that's right. So we are all learning how to use freedom of speech. There are many taboos, some repression, also police violence, towards demonstrators. So we are still, trying to move forward, but it's not like a straight line. I'd like to come back to the question that you raised, whether we changed after attending those workshops. Now, are you organizing them in Côte d'Ivoire? Well, in France and in Côte d'Ivoire. Well, it is true that sometimes we have the feeling that it's pointless. But in fact, my career is a career as a migrant. I left the Congo, Brazzaville, when there was a war going on. Then I found myself in Côte d'Ivoire because my plane landed in Côte d'Ivoire. And then I found myself in France later on, and that's my personal career. But I don't want to talk about it in too much detail. But I remember during a workshop, we were talking about migrations, and I was telling all about my life to some young people, and I was telling them that I was in France, but it was not a choice. It was because of what had happened to me, and so I was a self-made man, and I was paying my taxes, and I had established myself here. But then they realized that the migrant, they were not looking at migrants the same way, because in the past they thought the migrants were the ones that were leaving their country to come to France to do terrorism or to steal the job of the French people away from them. But in fact, they realized that everybody was different and everybody's life was different. I remember one of the students told me, I didn't like migrants, but it's because I had never taken the time to talk to a migrant. And when listening to you, I realized that sometimes they hear, but it's not their fault. And I thought that was quite important. The fact that I would explain my life, if it helps young people to have a different way of looking at immigration, a more tolerant way of looking at it, then I can do it. And I realized that sometimes when you explain your life, it is important because the one in front of you does not necessarily look at things the same way. So I have changed, but the students I was talking to have changed as well, and I think it's very important. Yes, it's true. I think that the fact that you explain press illustrations and, notably what happened with Charlie Hebdo, we oppose the silence and we didn't have any dialogue. So there is an image that we should tear down, the cartoonist in his room without any legitimacy. So we need to break that image. And also the fact that we should feed ourselves from exchanges. It gives a direction and it gives us a better perception of what we can convey. At the time of the attack against Charlie Hebdo, why was it a trigger for you? Did it play a role in your commitment? Personally, yes. In what way? You thought, I have to fight? Or no, I was in the office of press cartoonist, and we didn't know that it was going to build up in such a way, even though there were some indicators. So the format is not just to draw, but to make that job live. Maybe to meet with audiences that are not obvious, We work in prisons, we work with the national education, we work in popular environments, we also work abroad, and all this is giving you some distance. I remember what Jean Plantu was saying after the Charlie Hebdo attacks. Young people saying, I am not Charlie, and we were convinced that the whole world was saying, I am Charlie. Well, when you are hurt, you need to express what you feel. And, what was said to the young people was, first of all, you should shut up. And I think that was a mistake, you know, because there were some emotional consequences. That's what CAC said. Let's not forget that the pedagogical aspect of cartooning for peace developed and after the Charlie Hebdo attack. So far, there were cartoonists doing their job. And when Cartoonists for Peace, working with cartoonists having problems in the world, very often because they were living in dictatorships and the power was persecuting the cartoonists. And all of a sudden, in the middle of Paris, people were killing the cartoonists. At one point, the fact that the national education turned to Cartoonists for Peace, asking whether cartoonists could come and do some pedagogical work, we said yes, because some of our colleagues and friends died. And number two, because we realized that within schools and colleges, there were unexpected reactions, you know, people saying that it was very good and that it was only normal. So what is the purpose for us? It is to have people speak, which happens very easily, to try to find out what people think about it, including the Charlie Hebdo attacks. And sometimes even if they're only 16 years old, they all have a very precise idea. And to try to explain things that seem to be obvious to them because they've heard them. So first of all, to listen to them, try to see where they stand, and then provide our expertise. But the fact that we ask them, what do you think of this? And try to understand what is a democratic, secular republic, which is and it's different with Tunisia, for example, that I am entitled to laugh at the sacred things. So, and teachers are doing a remarkable job, but that you are entitled to laugh at religions. You know, what I hear, blaspheme is like laughing at Muslims, but it is to laugh at all religions. And if we have to talk about a personal experience, originally we do it in an empirical way because people have died. And but what is very strong is that when you hear those exchanges, it's very dynamic, but also a little bit worrying, because what's coming out, especially now with the murder of Mr. Paty, some teachers are wondering about whether they should continue to tackle those topics with their students, and we understand that they can be fearful. And the more we can reach out to young people, the more we can try to provide some precise information. And very often, you know, they're telling us, oh, okay, I hadn't seen things that way, so it's not a waste of time. No, Mykaïa was talking about the fact that we should defend the Republic, the secularity, all those values. Is it mandatory, universal? And isn't there a difference? It's a little bit complicated, but if you could try to answer your way. In fact, there are different ways of expressing humor. If we talk about press illustrations, some of them are going to use one language and others are going to be silent. So silent cartoons are going to be more universal because they will use codes that everybody can understand, like, you know, planet Earth. Everybody will understand what it is, but others might be offended because they think that the Earth is flat. Well, in that case, they might feel offended. But if you put Europe at the center of the Earth, yeah, on top of it. What has become universal is the diffusion means, you know, you have a little number of readers or a big number of readers seeing a cartoon, and then all of a sudden it is being shared and it becomes viral. Then you're not talking about the same audience, you know, it is reaching out to everybody. And then the feedback could be different depending on the viewer, and also the risk of the instrumentalization. But it has completely changed over the past few years. In the past, you would draw your cartoon. You know, we're talking about a comfort zone, but it was rather a value zone. But now your cartoon is crossing borders, invisible borders, but it is crossing borders. Yes, that's what I'm talking here in this cartoon. I'm talking about the murder of Samuel Paty, and it has triggered a campaign calling for hate. So, in fact, you start on the basis of a teacher doing his job and doing his job very well, and there has been many things said around it, but then all of a sudden the teacher is being killed. So it goes beyond the school environment. Now, when we are being asked, is humor universal? I'm tempted to say no. Humor is not universal because cultures are not universal. I think the humor will depend on the culture. And there are criteria, there are symbols that are cultural. In the press illustrations, we use a lot of colors and some symbols do not mean the same from one country to the other, from one culture to the other. You think that you make the whole world laugh by using a color and an image or a symbol, but it's not necessarily the case. Laughter is universal, but not humor. I think it depends on each culture's specificity. I think humor is very subjective. We know it for many other things, and it is true for press illustrations. Having said that, you know, we know that humor is very subjective, so we cannot envisage having a drawing that is going to make the whole world smile, not even the whole room. So, like you said, our cartoons can be found everywhere in the world. So, does that mean that the humor that we're using is going to please everybody? We know that it's not the case. So if we start thinking that this cartoon is going to be seen somewhere else and might trigger some reactions, it's the end of our job, because we're going to self-censor ourselves, whatever we do. There is a strong desire when you are a cartoonist. What are the fundamentals? Usually, a press cartoonist, and that's what we recall in our workshops. You don't wake up in the morning thinking, I'm going to insult somebody. No, you wake up in the morning and you look at the news, and you want to give your opinion on the news. And that's why governments of the countries where those informations are taking place are not very happy, because we want to make people smile on top of it. And that work that we're doing, we are doing it on the basis of a piece of news. So let's say there are some attacks done on behalf of God or against democracies or against the secularity, the cartoonist is going to react. So the fact that people are telling us you are telling this too much or you're expressing your opinion too much, that's not possible. We cannot please everybody. You know, some people hate press illustrations. Press illustrations are freedom. You know, the fact that you can draw is a big freedom The fact that you can laugh at something that is not funny, that's a big freedom. Censors hate that. So if you remove that freedom away from us, freedom of speech, if you stop that, we might come back to this, but let's not forget that after the attacks, we've heard, yes, of course we are Charlie, but of course it's not good, but stop joying because you are worsening, you are making things worse. Now, you're using the secularity as being a universal value. Are you convinced of it? Are you certain? Well, certainty, I'm not, usually I rather have doubts than certainties, but I've lived in countries where there was no secularity. I would like to recall what it is. Young people, when you ask them, what does it mean to be a lay person? Very often the answer, it's not to believe in God. So that's a problem. Secularity means that, I come from a country where I could not draw the president, I could not laugh at religion. When people are hypocrites, you cannot do anything about it. Now, I live in France and I can criticize religion when there is an interference, when religion is interfering with the politics, either because the religious leaders are doing some politics or they're not respecting the moral values that they want to impose on others. Now, the fact that you should go on war to impose it in another country, that's a different story. But, I live better in a country where there is secularity. Well, Tunisia is not a secular country, even though there has been some forces in favor. It's in the constitution that Islam is the state religion. And there is another article, which is Article 6, even if the Constitution says that there is a freedom of religion and conscience, it is also saying that the government is defending these sacred values. So, in fact, the Constitution is saying a lot and is contradicting itself. It depends on who is going to be in power, who is going to censor or not. There has been many events where there has been some attacks against freedom of speech because it was considered to be blasphemy. Like an exhibition that took place in Tunisia, there was a whole campaign against the people who participated in the exhibition, and there was no blasphemous works. So we cannot say that secularity is universal as far as Tunisia is concerned. When we were preparing that discussion, you were saying that when you are going to Morocco, you do have discussions with young people, and you start with a specific topic. What was that? I was mentioning that through some topics, you can start having a discussion on other principles, like the freedom of speech. And the idea is to make people's mindsets evolve, and it takes time. And that's a problem in our societies, that we want to have clear ideas and without trying to put things forward. But I think problems are different depending on the country where you're living. In France, when somebody sees a god in a cartoon, that's quite surprising because there is a separation between the religion and philosophy. The principle is that we put forward critical thinking, paving the way for possibilities. But you know, what could represent extremism and all possible manifestations. What we want to do, we want to feed that critical thinking. But you were saying that I'm going to talk about secularity, but I'm going to talk about the environment. That's the first point to build confidence. Maybe the environment should not be shut down in a ministry. Maybe it's something that could be part of a whole. We could start having discussions that could lead to something else. But to remain on a neutral ground, it's a way to find possibilities. So when you talk about a neutral ground, you know, the environment is not necessarily a neutral ground, but more than secularity. Is that what you're saying? It's less emotional. It's not infringing upon the privacy so much. It's not the fact that you are being coward, but if you want things to evolve, you need to find entry points. I have many other entry points. But when the religious prism is ubiquitous, then the fact, you know, you cannot think that you're going to shake all this just because you are a cartoonist, then you're right. And you are going to tell people that they are wrong and they have to change. Everybody can change. No, you're right. We're not here to impose our opinion. We're here to try to open doors or to give little keys that are going to help those people, those young people, to see things in a different way, to think, to find a way to analyze things in a critical way or using humor. And the point is not to impose anything on them, to tell them how they should be thinking, but to tell them that they will manage to be able to think by themselves, to widen their field of information, to avoid fake news.
My personal experience in the beginning of Arte, we had a discussion with a number of German journalists. It was at the time of the war in Yugoslavia, and the German journalists were saying the war is ugly. Of course, it's obvious. But the environment must be protected. We all know that. We have to protect the environment against the warming, global warming. But it's whereas the press illustration can be shocking. Those are two different things. Let's talk about our workshop and our job as a press cartoonist. Of course, we're not going to come to a workshop with a gun, a shotgun, saying that's what you have to think. It should be the other way around. That's what you should try to understand. We are not dictating their thoughts. This is where you should be. In our job as a press cartoonist, that's where we have different styles. We all have style differences to explain how we can do our job differently. So we should go beyond the limits. We should have no limit, no border. Because if we start setting limits in our job as press cartoonists, especially, that limit should be based on the other. It's not acceptable, because that is often the case. Why, as cartoonists, do you have total freedom of speech in France? Let me remind you that, fortunately, as press cartoonists, we do not have total freedom, even here in France, and they are quite surprised abroad. Yes, we have a limit, and the limit is the law in France. I cannot have a drawing with a guy with a bird saying death to the Arabs. I cannot draw a Jude saying all the Jews should be taken to the furnace. There's the law. And a lot of young people don't know that, the limits, the legal limits, the legal borders. It's not what people believe on the internet and say on the internet that you deserve death. No, the law, the French law, the sacred French law. And that's why people are accused, taken to court for hatred actions, and an anti-Semitic drawing as it exists across the world, where you have lampoon of anti-Semitic drawings. It's impossible in France. It's forbidden, the law. So this freedom is for everybody. We have to maintain the freedom we have, because it is not for granted that we have this freedom. Some people are working against this possibility to express ourselves against radical Islamism, because this is what today creates a problem, because we have people shout Allahu Akbar and trigger a bomb, a criminal attack. And some people say it's our religion, it is sacred, you cannot represent the prophet, it is sacred religion, it must be sacred for you because it's sacred for us. When it is presented like that, we have to fight back. And we have to avoid getting killed or throat cut off. In the workshop, we have to make young people understand the importance of freedom of expression. They have to use their freedom of speech as much as they can. It seems strange. A lot of people say it's pointless to speak, it's useless. Whatever they say is going to go nowhere. In the workshop, we try to make them understand it is necessary to speak up, free speech, to say what they want to say, but we need also to be able to listen to others, paying respect to others, listening to what the others have to say, because respect opens up the dialogue. In the workshop, we try to make them understand type of things. We're not coming to tell you this is good and this is wrong. And we let them open up, we let them speak, express their viewpoints, their opinions, and we know that the freedom of expression has its own limits, and the limits, the borders, is the respect for others. Once they have understood this, their views on the debate has evolved after that. But if their viewpoint is to say that women should stay at home, clean, and take care of children, what do you do? Yes, well, that's a clear-cut viewpoint. At one point, we have to make them understand it's their personal viewpoint, and their viewpoint is not above the law, and whatever their opinion and viewpoint, they have to comply with the house rules, with the law, and respect the regulations, the legal criteria, and they have to respect the French habits, legal habits. I'd like to speak after you, I agree with you, because when it happens, during the workshop, I think it's useful to confront these various ideas to make sure there is a movement debate, to make sure the opposite side can convince the others, and vice versa, with a number of reasons, and then to go across and help these young people to change opinion, to teach them to emerge with reasons, arguments. We don't want them to convince the others. We want to create a real dialogue. And do you get the feeling you can succeed to make them understand there are a number of universal values? Do you get the feeling you achieve these goals through this pedagogical tool or system? Yes, through the moving debate. What can we see as a result? They can have a clear-cut viewpoint and listen the adverse side. Listening to them, they can modify, change, and their ideas on this and their opinions. In the moving debate, it's a debate of ideas, those who are for and those who are against, pros and cons. And they try to convince each other through their various declarations to attract and to convert others to their own side, and move through the moving debates. On one side, they change side One time they are on the left, then they go to the right, and vice versa. So opinion depends on the knowledge we have of this topic, and sometimes we have an opinion on a topic which is totally wrong because we don't have the right information that they understand. At the end, they understand during a moving debate. Do you get the feeling you can try to change things in the schools, whether it's in France or Morocco? All cartoonists have a pretty similar experience when we meet young people. In the beginning, they all agree, and then they say, I have no opinion on this or that. But in a workshop like this, a lot of things happen. Between the beginning and the end, a lot of things have happened. It's quite interesting to look at. It's quite interesting to help them express themselves with their own words and to encourage them, to lead them to find the right information. The right information, it's quite interesting in this pedagogical approach to have a reliable rationale and use the right resources to help them have a consistent debate and have consistent reasons to express. All of you, don't you feel discouraged? You came out of some debates or workshops with a feeling of total disappointment. I've had lots of different experience. Every time we have different reactions, I can see a progression, a development in the exchange or creation. Whether it's 2, 3, 4 or more in front of me, it's important to see something has changed in the end, something has grown into their minds. Whatever the individual sitting across from you, the idea is to develop ideas and to confront, to exchange ideas, and to come up with our own personal approach, ideas. I get the feeling when you talk about this, it's like a boxer who walks on the ring. Yes, maybe it's not a topic you deal with very easily. So dealing with young people is, to me, a challenge. It's a challenge for an adult to put a lot of hope that you're going to get avant-garde ideas and great ideas from these young people. It takes a lot of maturation work. The idea, the basic idea is to find for themselves a lot of answers. My goal is to have them expressing their own ideas and opinions. It's more interesting to live and share. Well, it's never a standard workshop. There is no standard. It could be discouraging. However, what can be worrying and discouraging, let me remind you that we are press cartoonists and we are not teachers. We are not teaching experts. Sometimes it's discouraging because 5 or 6 years after the terrorist attack in Charlie, to organize these workshops, to see after all this time, because year after year we have new generation of children, school children. Anyway, when we come back to see them after a few years, to see it's discouraging to see that there was no progress in their minds year after year. So for each workshop, it's never totally discouraging because you can see their bright eyes. And when students see, I didn't see it that way, I did not understand that an exchange. And then you feel it's incredible that you have to start from the grassroots. Sometimes it's really discouraging, and we should never give up. But there is always a problem because you have generations that don't change their opinion, and year after year they keep the same opinions against. That makes our job, our action, very useful, but it is important. We have to continue teaching. using these pedagogical tools, very often there is this idea of sand mountain that you have to remove with a shovel. We're all human beings here. We don't want to become secular martyrs. Why? Because even in school environments, we had the decapitation of a teacher. I have teachers. We have a teacher who's been beheaded, and some students are provocative, and they tell me, "You're not afraid to end up like Mr. Paty, beheaded?" So when you listen to that, you know, when I answer, if you were me in my shoes, if I were you, I would be afraid, sir. I would be afraid to come into this school. And then we try to keep a touch of humor. It's never easy. It belongs to us to be quite critical in our reactions. The idea is to go ahead, to anticipate questions. And my idea on the freedom of expression, of freedom of speech, is to preserve this freedom of expression, because naturally it's not forever. It's something we have to fight for, to preserve, to protect. So we need to have a constant reflection on these key issues, such as we need to define this right, freedom of expression, and to bring children to go in that direction. We need to explore all the limits of the law, and today we still have dark areas which remain unknown, that remain to be explored, analyzed. That's why we're here, to present more interesting approaches, visions down the road. I believe there was a period before Charlie in the field of press illustration, and there will be an after Charlie. And the generations that will come after Charlie have a specific approach regarding press cartoonists, because often they tell me in a workshop, very often the young people ask, why do cartoonists are regarded or like a narcissist? They often feel that a cartoonist is a narcissist. And we have to explain that a cartoonist is not a narcissist, that it does not come here to create trouble, it's not a troublemaker. It's necessary to explain young generation what is the real job of a press cartoonist. It is the consequence of the after Charlie period. After the workshops, I think in many workshops I was able to get the message across, and they have realized it was necessary to get to speak to the children. And this information task or operation is absolutely necessary. And this is true for a number of years. And the workshops are not going to be the same thing as they have do it in. There are a lot of workshops organized in France, but when across from you you find people who are trying to brandish a red rag in front of cartoonists and be threatening. But we're lucky in France, where we have a government, the state protects press cartoonists, and the French government protects press cartoonists. It's not the case in every other country, in many other countries. So we have this opportunity in France. However, and it's true in many other countries, we are losing step by step the general public, which is excited. And you have people saying, look at all these stories. And if there was no cartoonist, it would be worse. When I talk to school children, school students or elsewhere, and I explain when the cartoonists of Charlie have drawn the prophet and they died for that. When I talk about the Bataclan or the terrorist attack in East, I've never drawn the prophet and they died all the same. So if we all decided as cartoonists we are all going to stop drawing, and there will be no more terrorist attacks. We know it's not true, and are rising the general public against cartoonists. After six months after Mr. Paty, we still hear people say, why does Mr. Paty wants to keep showing cartoons and drawings? I think it's necessary to keep showing cartoons. I think it's absolutely necessary to do that. In the face, to confront this risk, is there a risk of self-censorship when we compare France and other countries? I get the feeling that in France we feel free to lampoon. We feel free to draw or to cartoon or to lampoon a pedophile priest more than Islamic terrorist. Do you get this general feeling? Do you share my vision? Yes, but for the time being, we did not have Jesus Akbar with terrorist attacks. Yes, true. If we are dealing with pedophilia in the Catholic Church, yes, we'll be able to do it freely. That's good. We have had lots of problems to achieve this situation when the Roman Apostolic Church was based in France. There was a call against profanity. It took many years until we have placed religion in the private sphere and not in the political sphere, to keep the religion in the private sphere only. And today there is this radical religion trying to take over other religions, because we find ourselves in a complex situation. It's more difficult tomorrow if we have a problem with an imam to dare doing it. And if we have reached this state of censorship, it means it's bad enough. We shouldn't have reached this situation. Let's talk about Tunisia, because that's where I live, in Tunisia. When I draw cartoons in Tunisia, I can talk about religion, but in Tunisia, the religious leaders hold the political power. I am critical against their use of religion to exercise their power on the people of Tunisia, so I have to talk about it. I cannot miss its criticism of power before talking about being critical about religion, because these religious people hold the power. So since religion is the people's opium, as we know, and it can be used against us to say you're critical against religion, it's profanity, but it's mere manipulation, because a religious party is more legitimate, according to them, because it represents honesty in the image given to their electorate. So what I criticize is the use of power by these religious people. Don't you feel discouraged sometimes and say, I must leave that country, Tunisia, for you? There are two things. Leaving my country, it's the country where I live. I have also a French passport, and I'm lucky because I can choose. It's a great opportunity because I can choose between Tunisia and France. But Tunisia is a country where I live. That's where I want to stay. When the situation is deteriorating, although we had the Spring Revolution, so the political situation is deteriorating, social and economic situations are deteriorating, without talking about the health situation. So opening and doing and organizing this workshop is a window of hope somewhere. But when I started cartooning, it was as a reaction, as a response to a radical group, to a number of extremist Salafists who want to gag women, to tell women how they must behave, what their minor role should be in society. That was my personal reaction to use a pencil. So organizing this workshop helps you personally. Absolutely, it's a lot of personal help, because personal support, because it helps me to do something for my country in humble terms, because when you visit a rural area in Tunisia, when you realize they have limited means, financial means to work, and they are so much motivated, they want to talk, express themselves, they have a strong desire to learn and to draw. When they hear from people around them, you don't need to draw. And when you tell them you don't have to learn how to draw for press illustration, you don't need to go to university for that. I'm sure we have questions from the audience, and we are going to try this quick exercise. Hope it's going to work. Yaz was alluding earlier to have wordless drawing, and we have prepared a number of cartoons without words, wordless, and we are going to ask people to fill in. You're going to be welcome if you have suggestions. Do you have any question? You're going to stand up, ask your question. I'm going to repeat because we don't have enough microphones. I'm going to repeat your question. So the question is, let me repeat your first question. You are speaking on behalf of a group in charge of youth support. There is a young person called Yunti coming from Mali. We don't have any Malian cartoonists, are they? Is it because they're all in jail? CAPI is a large international network gathering over 200 cartoonists all over the world. Today, four of us are representing cartooning here. But inside the audience, we have other cartoonists and many other cartoonists could not be invited and have stayed in Africa. I don't know if he's part. Mali is not yet part of cartooning for peace. It's not the governments or states. It's the cartoonists who are part of cartooning for peace, not the states. It's because we don't have any cartoonists from Mali because we don't have the right contacts. We've not yet identified the right person who could be part of it. I don't think they're all dead or all sent to jail. They're not in jail. It's just that the network is growing. Maybe in 1 or 2 years, maybe in just a couple of months, we'll have cartoonists from Mali. It's an issue we've not covered yet. There is a real boost of cartoons in Africa. It's part of the oral transmission culture, and in Africa we use cartoons and drawings, generally speaking, a lot, because we still have many countries where a lot of people don't want to read or write, and we use drawings to get the message across. It can be for the purpose of information or to get the message across. And we are currently working on a new project called this citizen drawing or citizen cartoons, leading people to take part in the democratic debate. We ask them to draw, press drawing, even if they can't really draw very well. We explain to them it's not drawing. The real scope is to share their message. Yes, we use drawings and cartoons very much widely in Africa. It works very well. And you explained to us that in a country in Africa, cartoons is a link of social. Yes, press illustration bring people together, bring them together. Social links, we see more and more people from different political sides laughing together at the same cartoon. But it's quite cultural. Côte d'Ivoire is lucky because we have this tradition of self-lampooning, where other African countries kindly make fun of their neighbor. You know, it's good humor, and it's part of social cohesion, and cartoons help us to go one step forward. Anybody want to try to feel the clouds? It's not an easy exercise. And the author of this cartoon is sitting here. Let me repeat. It's taken from Invitation Voyage, a poem by the French poet Baudelaire. Dream about the pleasure of living over there. The second donut. If I have enough money to cross the sea.
D'autres questions? Merci. Oui, vous avez une deuxième question. Voilà.
I need to repeat the question. We heard a lot about threat, decapitation, threat, fear. Is this the reason why you have a nickname or a pseudonym? In the beginning, the choice of an alias was because I did not take myself seriously in the beginning, so I decided not to take my real name up front. But it can also be used to protect yourself in the very beginning when you start drawing, but now I'm using my real name. Yas. My real name is Yacine, so Yas is short for Yassing. It's to create an identity through a cartoon or drawing. I don't have to protect myself. I'm lucky. But it's one way to protect yourself if you need to. My name is Trébonique Caparros, so it's too long to write under a cartoon, so I kept it short to Mykaïa. It's quite sad when you have to do that. We are press cartoonists. We talked about beheading, decapitation, but we are not responsible. It's a social situation which is quite sad. Press cartoon is here to make people laugh, to help people have some fun. That's our role. We must help people get a breath of fresh air and to have some. So sometimes we we draw something funny about something which is tragic, but there's not any reason to stop doing our job. I think it's a great conclusion. Thank you very much. Thank you so much, and thank you for sitting around this table, all four of you. Thank you very much. Please stay around. We have a 30-minute break, and you will be presented with a possibility for you to buy the book we have mentioned, the title of which is Africa, and get a dedication.